Welcome back to the Homes on Homes podcast. I'm Mike Holmes. I started this podcast to keep educating people on how to make it right, just like I've been doing for over 20 years on television. Here, you'll find raw, unscripted conversations with experts on building healthy homes, choosing quality products, safety at home, and more. Let's get started. Andrew, welcome to the very first Homes on Homes podcast. I understand you are a building, what do you call it?
Biologist.
Biologist. So is that like doctor?
I'll say that, but I don't think everybody else will.
I actually love that. I feel like I'm a doctor too. When you call me Dr. Holmes, I actually do have 2 doctorates.
Actually, a guy at Harvard said that designers, contractors affect your health more than your own doctor.
I'm going to agree with that. One way or another, whether you're renovating your home, especially if it's an old home, you can lead in the paint, asbestos in the plaster, all kinds of. I tell people, don't open things up unless you've checked it if your house is built before 1980. And the truth is 1985 was the real cutoff date. Anyhow, your whole goal of being a biologist is about a healthy home, correct?
That's correct.
So that is pretty cool. You are building a house right now in Toronto. Is it done?
No, we're just in the design stage, and it's in Little Italy / Trinity Bellwoods, right in downtown Toronto.
Okay.
We're really excited by this. Will be our first home, so this will be a great opportunity to test some new technologies, test some new systems, and see if we really know what we're doing.
So tell me a little bit about this. You're going to focus on indoor air quality, number one.
Number one.
Products, number 2.
Yes.
I'm right now assuming.
Yes.
And anything else?
Yeah, for sure. We're going to be doing purified and filtered water because the water we drink affects our health with what we're doing. And we're doing circadian rhythm lighting, which is just a fancy way of saying light that changes its color and its color spectrum. So as you go into the evening, it becomes warmer and warmer so that it doesn't kick in, stopping you from creating melatonin, which helps you go to sleep.
So let's see if I'm right here. During the day, you're going to be daylight, which
Yes.
is a white light, and we call it daylight because it matches true color outside.
That's correct.
And what we're used to through the day. As it gets into the afternoon, later into the evening, and starts to warm, to bring down your feeling?
Yes, so that your blue light stimulates cortisol and creates great activity. It's fantastic in the morning. It's what gets you going. But it harms you at night because it breaks your rhythm. And our body is tied to nature. We're tied to the planet. We're tied to the sun. And so if we don't turn it off, and all of us are addicts of some type of device, if we don't bring this down a notch,
You're awake.
You're awake and you can't get a good night's sleep. We're even going as far as creating dark rooms for sleeping so that you black out because of the lights outside. Your home could have a street lamp at the end of the driveway flashing in, and if you don't have a blackout on it, it'll disturb your sleep. You'll fall asleep, but you won't fall deeply asleep.
So you're actually talking a human instinct that we don't recognize because what we do know is what we know, what we do every day, having dinner, maybe a drink before bed, watching TV, the norm, I'm going to call it. But this is natural human instinct, which is much like animal instinct, because that's how animals act. It's not like they think and talk like we do, or as intelligent as human beings. Now that's interesting. With this home, what are you trying to accomplish? Like LEED status?
No, we have all the respect in the world for what all the green standards are doing. We're pushing, particularly, none of them go as far as we're going on the health aspect. And so we're not after points, we're after result, we're after performance for the home. We are developing our own standard for what we think good indoor air needs to be, from a VOC level to, we'll hopefully talk about radon gas and its terrible effect on humans, to the humidity level in the home, which is really incredibly important, especially now with COVID. All the scientists pretty much have converged on 40 to 60% relative humidity as being the level of humidity that is not only good for our respiratory system, but COVID doesn't like it. It breaks the skin and the membrane, which is very thin, and so it'll keep you safer at that level. We were always going there, but now with COVID, we're saying you got to keep your home in that humidity level, that range.
And it's funny because I don't think people pay attention to this, never mind indoor air quality, which we're going to really touch on. But humidity in itself, you know, do you have a humidifier on your furnace? Most people are going to say yes. Do you even know what it looks like? Is the filter clean? Is it actually working? Or do you have your nosebleeds throughout the winter because the furnace is running, which means the air is very dry? These are little things that I like of what you're doing because it's recognition to what we need to be healthy. We don't realize that 40 to 60. We want that everywhere. We want it outside. It could change.
Yes.
We want it inside, especially being at 90% staying indoors. So that is a definite that we need to pay attention to. But one little thing, humidity, that people really just don't see, much like the air. They don't see what's floating around in the air. You've heard me say this a million times. We breathe approximately 18,000 spore counts of mold in 1 cubic meter of air space outside every day. And we're trying to match that inside our home. And in most cases, just because of maybe high humidity, we could have more mold spores in the air indoors. Little things you've got me curious on now is what type of furnace that you are speccing for this house.
So we're right now looking at heat pump. We want to decarbonize the entire house, and we're looking at heat pump technology. We're also seriously evaluating radiant floor heating, and we've got a system that we're playing with and looking at whether we might actually make it a hybrid geothermal system. So we draw some of the energy from the planet that's free, if you can get past the capital cost. And we think we found the way of doing it that will be within our budget category. The net result is air blowing around generally isn't good, but we need the air. We need the ventilation. And so after all of our analysis, we're back to filtration solutions to try and get the particles out of the air, but we need the air.
Radiant heat, we can use solar passive design. We can use geothermal technology, that's ground temperature, to help assist to be energy efficient. The drawback to that is we're not using anything to clean the air. Do you use a standalone air cleaner in that case? Things that I've learned along the way is that, and we'll talk about HVAC for a second, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. All that ductwork, we need to look at it like it's the veins of the home. It's the lungs of the home. And that little filter that we don't pay enough attention to on the furnace, where the air return goes into the furnace and cycles that air through the house, is supposed to pick up all the spores, dust, pet dander, you name it, skin that comes off our body. Because we don't pay enough attention to that, I now look at the HVAC system and start looking, is this truly what we should be doing? Remember, everything we do is minimum code. And the reason we do that is because it's a starting of a technology of building houses that are supposed to be healthy, environmentally friendly within reason. But everything works at a minimum. When we try to upgrade code, we tend to upgrade code with structure and strength. There is really no upgrade when it comes to a healthy home. We're still using standard drywall. We're still using standard tiles, standard flooring. I can go on. And that maybe we're not paying attention to the VOCs and that's the off-gassing from different products that are going in the house. One thing I want to say is that we know that parts per million when it comes to volatile organic compound, carpet, furniture. There's more problems with furniture now that I'm seeing than anything, because paint companies are paying attention, trying to make it zero VOC, their paints. Flooring companies are paying attention to bring down those VOCs. But when you look at parts per million, and I want your opinion on this, when you look at parts per million based on each product that is allowed to be in your house with VOCs, what happens if you add them all up? Because it's about one product at a time with allowable limits of VOCs that off-gas from that product. But when you have, let's say, 20 different products, just as an example, and they all have, let's say, the lowest of minimum million parts per
million.
Parts per million, again, of the VOCs. What happens if there's too many products in your house that contain VOCs? Do they add up?
Yes. So
See, that's what I thought.
yeah, so they're cumulative. So, and then the challenge becomes is that they all add up. There's a score that's a TVOC score, total volatile organic compounds, that are in place. We're examining technology because we see part of our role is to evaluate what's out there and how can we help people understand the technology with what they're using. And we're hoping that this home that we're building in Toronto becomes a living lab for as long as we can keep it, because our goal is to sell it and give it to some hopefully worthy person that needs to be in that environment. We need technology. As a building biologist, we look to nature as the golden rule. It's the gold standard for us. But we're nature by itself because of all the things that we've now introduced just can't get us there. We need technology to help us identify when did we get past that level that's acceptable, and is that going to be adequate enough for us to do what we need to do?
That is a great point. We started off with our 2,000 homes, and this was the real recognition that we're building a more airtight home, a more energy efficient home. And what happened in that time period, and that was probably 40 years ago, give or take. In that time period, all of a sudden, because we made our homes more airtight, trying to be more energy efficient, to heat it, to cool it, to not have air leakage inside the house, we created all kinds of rules and specs of what we're going to do. Here's what happened. We end up actually putting more mold into the homes because we allowed the ability of mold growth. And I think we allowed the ability of more mold growth. And the easy way to see this is just really simple. Mold takes two food groups to grow. One, moisture, two, organic. Moisture in the house, if we've got hot meeting cold in our outside wall cavity, which we're going to have because we're trying to keep it on the warm side, but that cavity on the outside will introduce moisture.
Yes.
Two, the lumber in our homes is now sapwood and not hardwood, or heartwood is what we used to call it, which is old wood, which resists bugs, resists moisture, and resists mold naturally. Sapwood, it being young wood, will mold within 24 hours. So we've now, paper on the drywall, etc., we've introduced in that time period so much mold growth. Now, things that I'm watching along the way as I grow up, why is this molding? Why is this not working? Why, as my mind thinks. I tend to start looking at things like, okay, I understand mold growth now. I really get it, why it's happening and how bad it is. We've done something wrong to our building envelope. I don't want to say we've done something wrong because it was a step in the right direction, but it backfired on us because we didn't really pay attention to the end result, hence the house you're doing. Hopefully you can have studies on it for years to come. Had we have done that at the time, we might have been able to anticipate or foresee that there was going to be a spike in allergies. There's going to be a spike in asthma, bronchitis, because we're living in an airtight home now with adding VOCs, more mold spores, etc., which brings me back to the beginning of what I said. 80% of the homes we're in, at 90% of the time, have 5 times more or up to 5 times more poor air quality. Within code, there's nothing really that states we need to do something about air as a code. It's about structure, it's about the basement, it's about longevity of the home, and that's all it's really about. So I respect you for what you're doing right now, and this is something that's really important to me. There is things we can do. I can probably work with you on this. One thing I learned in New Orleans, we built a home that was a Category 5 hurricane, would withstand it.
Incredible.
We built a home that would not mold, provided they controlled the humidity inside the home, which we did the best to teach them. But we used nothing but mold-resistant products. And again, that's not in code. The biggest thing about this was learning from the first houses, which were phenomenal. These were LEED status, LEED Platinum to be exact. As they continued into this, and a very good friend of mine was in there, being involved in the learning, the rethinking of what they can do, he found that, and I want to talk to him one day on this, he found that if we move to a high velocity furnace system, they were terrible before because they were so noisy, people didn't like them. But in truth, because of the high velocity has so much power, we can now put on a MERV 14 filter on this furnace, which now we filter the air coming in and we filter the air being cycled. And it's powerful enough to actually push through these thick filters and not actually reduce the home, but clean the home. His whole goal here was to actually design a home that anyone with not just allergies, but with really asthma or bronchitis could move into these houses and within a year not realize that they had asthma or bronchitis anymore because the air was so clean. It was almost like living in a bubble. These are things that we can work on and move forward. I'm assuming you're going there.
Yeah, totally agree. And one of my motivations was my daughter, who's 28 years old and is not as bad as she was as a teen, has asthma. And you know, there's 3 million Canadians with asthma. There's 20 odd million Americans with asthma. And it's a common thing. It's something like 1 in 10 now. And 10% roughly have severe asthma where they're only one attack away from being hospitalized on it. So that was one of my driving forces to try and say, what can we do? Some simple things that we can do to go through it. The MERV technology with standard homes in the higher numbers, our furnaces can't push them, as you were saying, in doing it. We want to go one step further, and we want to get into the HEPA, which is beyond the MERV 16, and trying to work with manufacturers as to how can we put a HEPA system in. COVID kind of raised the bar that you can no longer be an 8 out of 10 on air filtration. You got to now be at the 9-10 category because the virus is down to the 0.125 micron level, and HEPA will get you to 0.3. And so it will allow, if this virus adopts itself to a droplet or something of that nature, it's going to be fatter and it's going to amalgamate and it'll get trapped by the HEPA system. So not perfect, but at least you've got a great chance that this virus and maybe the future viruses to come. I think the HEPA mechanical way of stopping the virus is a really good way to go.
I'm not going to argue that. In my home, I have a whole house HEPA filter system that runs through my furnace. So it not just has a filter in the furnace, which is a MERV 11 filter, which a lot of people don't know that, but it is the higher or thicker part of that captures more debris in the air. We'll just say it's simple. I have the whole house HEPA filter, and I mean, all we got to do is pull that filter out, clean it every once in a while, put it back in again, and we do that. And is my house any good? Like I notice even in my home that I tend to have breathing problems, and I think it's because I'm up in Mother Nature. I have 10 acres. There's lots of trees, and possibly something that I'm allergic to. I'm working on this myself, trying to mathematically in my own mind figure out how to help myself, never mind anyone else. If you like the show, check out the episode page on makeitright.ca for more tips. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Amazon Music. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode.